everything that AI can spit out about our brand and its competitive set, and here are some strategies based on best practices is great, but we don't know until we test and iterate and ideate that those are going to actually work for us.
In today's hyper-connected world, brand communication strategies are evolving faster than ever before. I'm speaking with Anika Jackson, Executive Director of the ICL Foundation and adjunct instructor at University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. Today, we're exploring how organizations can effectively build meaningful connections with their audiences amid changing consumer expectations, technological disruption, and increasing competition. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Jackson.
Thank you, Dr. Lutsky.
It's great to chat with you, given that we work together at USC, and I know you do a lot of other things related to digital media, branding. I can't wait to pick your brain for this podcast. And let's just jump right into it. Looking at some research recently, it suggests Gen Z, start with Gen Z, has fundamentally different brand expectations than previous generations. I think we're seeing that with lots of generational shift. Given these changes, and especially the impact of technology, what effective brand communication strategies are emerging to connect with this particular increasingly influential demographic, but perhaps others as well?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And this is something that has become more evident post-pandemic, not just for Gen Z, but for all generations, is that we want authentic content. We want to form a real deep connection with the brands and the people that we support. So we need to know what their values are. We need to know that they're adhering to their values. And we want transparency about their practices and, everything about the brand, where they're sourcing material from. We also know that user-generated content or user-generated lookalike content is becoming much more prevalent than professionally produced content. 82% of Gen Zers trust companies that use real customer images in their branding, in their advertising, and their marketing over professional photography. Now, I know this is going to be a little bit interesting to discuss in this AI world, where we're also seeing a lot more people use AI to generate advertising campaigns. But in effect, we want to see authentic communication. We want to see real people, know real users, get their stories, understand the brand story, the story, behind the product and service. And we also see a lot of interactivity. So people want to see polls. They want to see their favorite brands interacting on social media with consumers, and video first. Of course, we all know the attention deficit disorder that is happening to generations, where it's between 8 and 12 seconds of capture time that we have. So seeing short form videos that can relay a message really succinctly and get the Gen Zer to want to click through and get more information on the brand is really vitally important. We want to see sustainability. 76% of Gen Zers want to know what their brands are doing to promote sustainability, whether that is with DE&I, social justice, inclusivity, or just recycling and being good for the planet. We want to make sure that we're delivering personalized, experiences through our brands. And I think that's an area where AI is really going to help, where we're pretty soon going to be able to look at a website and get personalized messages based on our consumer behavior with that brand, versus seeing one website that's supposed to cover everybody. And that there's dialogue and really partnership mindset. So it's not just a transactional experience anymore. It is that this is a partner, right? We want brands to look at us as thought partners. And I'm not Gen Z, of course, but even as a Gen Xer, I want the same things. But Gen Zers specifically, they want to know that they are really being listened to, that they're being heard, and that their opinion is being valued when it comes to these brands. So I know that I just threw out a lot.
It is a lot. Well, and for anyone listening, if you want to hear even more about this, Anika runs an incredible podcast, Your Brand Amplified, which we're going to put in the show notes as well. So you can hear every episode, deep conversations about this. But let me just parse out a little bit from that answer and kind of put it in two buckets. One question and then another question. The second question is I'm going to ask you is about that sort of social responsibility piece that you touched on. But look, we have AI now that will do DM automation on TikTok and Instagram. We have AI that will now render all of the images of the happy customers doing whatever it is you want them to be doing in whatever setting. So I could see how organizations are struggling to balance that authentic brand identity while adapting to such rapid change with digital platforms that they struggle with the content. What approaches from your perspective are providing the most successful outcomes in this kind of environment?
Mm. I think there's a time and place for everything. If you have a product on Shopify, on Amazon, right, on one of those big players, that's a really appropriate place to take advantage of their artificial intelligence to create ads, to create images, to maybe take an image that you've uploaded for your product, but make it a little bit more dynamic. But when it comes to, I think, social media and images and reviews and things like that, which are, I mean, I look at reviews for everything I buy at this point. And I want to see not just the overarching scores, but I look at, is this a product that's returned often? What are people really saying about it? So that I can make really informed purchase decisions. And I think that's what we're seeing with these generations as well, with Gen Z, for instance. So I'm seeing a lot of movement towards, yes, we have to have professional stuff, and maybe that can be AI generated, but because we want to hear authentic voices as well, that's where using user generated content, amplifying what real users are saying, the videos that they're sharing is important. So I think there is a place for both. And I think it just comes down to looking at your overall strategy and making sure that you're using the right format to the right people at the right time in the right place.
And that really kind of speaks to the second part of the question off of your initial answer was the idea of authentic social impact. I mean, even with artificial intelligence, I was at a conference recently and someone asked about the sustainability impact of just using AI on electricity use, on the environment, a number of things. And I think that some companies just sort of do that as a giveaway, like sort of I'm being opportunistic, so I'm going to put together a position on how what my company is doing is good for the environment, when in fact you're just sort of jumping on a bandwagon. How are successful brands integrating purpose-driven messaging without seeming inauthentic?
Oof, that is
Just going to test you because you know everything.
I really don't. Well, we see that brands like Cotopaxi, Patagonia, right? We see brands that are on one side that are really showing who they are and they're living that every single day. We see other brands like an Amazon, right, where their packaging has maybe gotten a little better. Maybe they're using more electric vehicles. So they're making some steps and some strides. That doesn't solve the consumer issue of we are over consumers and we are buying too much stuff and some of the stuff is cheaply made, right? So that's a whole other issue that we should be thinking of as consumers. I think that we also are seeing a lot with in this political realm where brands are kind of jumping from one side to the other. Maybe they had DEI initiatives on their website. Maybe they had special offerings for each theme month, whether it's Women's History Month, Black History Month, et cetera. And they're kind of shying away from that. And so we saw some brands completely go the opposite direction. And now we're seeing a backlash because people are saying, hold up, you were a brand we could depend on. You did all of these great things. You really seem to be living your values. And now you're kowtowing and you're showing us that that's really not what it's about. And it's hurting their bottom lines. I mean, we can see that from Tesla to Target to many other brands that just consumers are not going in store. They're not shopping. They're trying to find alternatives. But we do see other brands, Costco, for instance. This is one that has been really widely studied, where they said, no, we have a very diverse workforce. We're going to stand for what we believe in. And guess what? Their memberships have increased. The number of people going in, right? So it's an interesting time that we live in. Not on top, we have this layer of technology, and we also have what's going on socially, politically, economically, that are all drivers and indicators of whether people are really being smart. And we've seen some companies that overcorrected say, oh gosh, you know what? We really should have stood up a little more for our beliefs because then we wouldn't be in this situation. So I think that consumers are pretty savvy these days about weeding out and knowing the intention of a company. For instance, if somebody is buying from Temu, they know that they're buying fast fashion, they're buying items that are going to fall apart, perhaps even before they use them, perhaps after one try, three tries. Maybe some items will last a little longer, but they know what they're buying, and that's a very different mindset from the majority of the consumers who are really intentional and want to think about what items are going to last, right? Because they're also looking at their pocketbooks. They're looking at the economy. They're saying, maybe I'm going to pay a little more for an item that I know is going to have longevity versus something that I'll wear once, twice, three times, and then I'm going to have to replace it.
I want to kind of ask a follow up because there's an element of strategy in here, and maybe it's brand strategy, maybe it's business strategy. I mean, look at here's an example. What's gone on recently in higher education? You have two examples of two Ivy League universities, Columbia and Harvard,
Yep.
and both have faced existential financial pressures from what's going on in the government today. Now, if you look at what Columbia did, they made a decision to do things that, to me, are off brand for Columbia University, which is a huge, diverse, complex, academically independent institution and famous for it. And they've sort of done what they can, I think, from a strategic standpoint. The other side is Harvard, which is in a similar situation, I would say maybe at a slightly larger scale, that kind of went, no, this is what we believe. These are our core values, and we challenge this. Who knows which one will be more successful? But I wanted to ask as a follow-up, when a company is trying to make that decision, a university, when Target or Tesla or Harvard are trying to make this decision between brand integrity and financial pressure, is there a right direction to go in? Is it always values congruence? Do we have to at some point say as a brand, look, we need to bend on some things? Or is that just watering down the brand from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. My true answer is it's watering down the brand, but I also understand that sometimes there needs to be some negotiation. I think part of the bigger issue is that we're not really talking about the core issues, right? It's being labeled as getting rid of D&I, as anti-Semitism, as any number of topics, but you really have to dive deeper into each of those and have a conversation, right? Not just make a decision because somebody makes a threat. I was actually at Harvard campus when this was happening. My daughter and I are doing some college touring. So it was really interesting to see the energy on campus, to see the number of media outlets that were there. And I say kudos to Harvard. And what's interesting is I also read afterwards that after Harvard made that stand, now, of course, they have a lot of alums with a lot of deep pockets, right? So they're in a, and Columbia does too. So they're in a situation where they said, okay, we're going to have to do some hard things. We might have to cut some of our programs, some of our research that is vitally important, but they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to take a stand, not just for Harvard, but for all higher education institutions, for just the mere construct of learning. Now, you and I are lifelong learners. We're always going to be striving to continue that path. And we see celebration in that. And that's part of what I think is trying to be put down, right? We don't want people to think for themselves. So Harvard's taking that stand, I think, is amazing. And we see things like Columbia now saying, okay, we took this stand, but we're going to hold firm on these other points. We also see some retractions. For instance, with the number of foreign students that we have coming to the United States, we now see that the administration is saying, oh, yeah, don't worry about that. We're not going to ask for every single piece of documentation. Now, that it changes every day. But I do think that if you stand up, then there's not just more support from the people who believe the same things, but there's also admiration perhaps on the other side of, oh, you are taking a stand. You're not just going to let me run up, all over you. So I err on the side of Harvard. In a perfect world, we would all be doing that, right? Living in our authentic, completely authentic values and beliefs.
And I put you on the spot with that one. But that is a good answer, and I think that a lot of folks would agree. Let's get back to the AI topic because it's probably a safer area. I had a conversation with a faculty member at a Bay Area university recently. She made the argument that there will be a time where we question what is the human for? If artificial intelligence can perform tasks for us, create content, teach, all of it, what is the future of humanity? This is a big question, but kind of bring it down to the micro level and the topic of content distribution. We tend to say that the human element isn't going anywhere, that we still need humans to be involved. But what core elements of brand storytelling are going to remain in the hands of humans? Where is it irreplaceable to have humans involved in brand storytelling?
I am a firm believer that we need human strategy and creativity. If you think about the tools that we have with artificial intelligence, all of that comes from our input, everything that we've done, right? It's not creating new constructs, at least right now. It's creating based upon all of its knowledge base of all of the things that we've ever done to create campaigns, to think about branding. When it comes to, for instance, students, I had such a great response. My students verbally this term did this. I saw light bulb moments go off time and time again with how they were realizing this mindset shift because of the material. But that didn't come from just material, right? If I had an AI teaching the course, the live sessions, using the notes that we are provided, it would be a very different class. And it would be more just informational, where I'm adding in the human element. I'm adding in things. Every time I'm teaching a class, I'm looking at new things that I add in day of, because I think those are important things in that moment. And the same thing goes for any brand, right? I don't see that part of us being replaced. I think these tools are just that. They're tools. They're a good jumping off point, but there is room for creativity. I'll give you an example. I'm taking an AI class right now, and the professor teaches undergrads and graduate level. And he said, oh, my undergrads take all of my lectures and turn them into podcasts so they can listen to them. And for their finals, they're not turning in papers, they're turning in songs, they're turning in other formats, other mediums. And so I said, well, can I do that for my 3 essay final? And he said, yes. And that makes me think, like, that's another way of being creative and really stretching who we are, right? So now when I'm thinking about teaching, I'm thinking about brand, I think about what AI platform, beautiful AI presentations, AI, Gamma, et cetera, can I use to enhance what I'm putting together to help clarify what I'm trying to say with the imagery I use? Or is it better or is it worse? Does it take more time for me to correct something in that versus using a plain old PowerPoint or a Canva deck, right? So I think that it's actually going to open up more room for us to sit in creativity and innovation and strategy and be able to bring those more human elements to our brands, because everything that AI can spit out about our brand and its competitive set and here are some strategies based on best practices is great, but we don't know until we test and iterate and ideate that those are going to actually work for us. So I think the human component is always going to be important.
I'm scared to death by that answer that this podcast is now short-lived, because if students can create podcasts out of academic lectures, which we know you can do with tools like Notebook LM now and others, but it's interesting. It does put fear into our minds when you see that there are things that humans do that can be replaced. But your point is well taken.
Yeah, but think about podcasts. I have seen people try to do podcasts with their digital twin, and it is not successful. I've seen the AI Breakdown is one of my favorite AI podcasts, and he does record some part of it with his AI voice, which is exactly his voice, but he lets us know. And that just cuts down, because that cuts him, his time down from having to speak the whole time. And, what happens when we're teaching and when we're podcasting all the time and our voices start getting raspy. I have my emergency right here. So he's just saving his voice a little bit, but it's still, he's the one who's creating what it's going to say. That is not going to go away. Podcasts are a fantastic medium for us to present information to people where it's human to human interaction. And we use these tools to enhance. I see it all as very exciting. I see it all as a bonus for our humanity and being able to have more time to spend with family, friends, and create more experiences and have more time to actually live versus just being behind a screen for 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Well said. Let's pivot and end with a question about branding and brand amplification, which you do a lot about in your podcast. A lot of listeners for this podcast are at small businesses, some are at smaller colleges and universities, and they're competing against much larger enterprises with tremendous marketing spend. From your perspective, and maybe AI is a part of this, maybe not, maybe there's just some tried and true methods, the specific brand amplification strategies that can help level the playing field for the upstarts, for the smaller organizations in today's digital ecosystem where volume really seems to matter. What are some of the strategies that can help the smaller businesses and smaller organizations?
You hit the nail on the head. It's about volume. So, for instance, going on podcasts. There are a lot of educational podcasts. They're looking for guests. They want educators to go on them. There are a lot of small business and entrepreneurship podcasts. They want small business owners to go on them. It's a great way to get your voice out there and create more content. And believe me, it's not about how many listeners the podcast has, because that's information that you can repurpose into blog posts. You can put it on Reddit forums. You can use it in so many different ways to get your message out that it in itself amplifies who you are and your brand. One thing that I'm seeing is LinkedIn newsletters, which very few people are taking advantage of. There are 1.1 billion people on LinkedIn. There are a little over 400,000 newsletters that are native to LinkedIn. LinkedIn will promote your newsletter 4 times, 2 via email, 1 to your subscribers of the newsletter, 1 to your followers. It'll promote it twice at least on platform with notifications to your subscribers, but then also sharing it out to wider audiences, even second, third, and beyond connections who have maybe looked at things with the same keywords, who would be interested in your content. So this is a really underutilized asset that's free for all of us to use. You just have to have a LinkedIn profile. That is a place that I would really put a lot of time and attention into. Also, look at these things like Quora, like Reddit, all these forums where people are asking questions. Make sure that you're part of the conversation. Community management is so important. People often overlook that, right? They post, but then they don't have anybody responding right away. Maybe they have a bot that doesn't know how to respond. They have somebody who doesn't know their brand voice. So making sure you're responding, making sure that you're having alerts on Google so that you know when your business or your school name is coming up. Then you can go into that Reddit forum and have somebody post something or post a link and be helpful, right? I think those are things that are important. So being really community centered and focused, finding out where your community is living, making sure that you're providing resources, thinking about partnerships. Partnerships is huge, and it's a great way to think about how to propel each other's brands. That's what podcasts are for. That's what other things can be for as well. Make sure that you're really showcasing your personality and that you're also showing what you are the authority of. So many times we see in advertising, we see in messaging, we see on websites, we see in decks that people are talking about their features. They're not starting with the end user who is the hero. And here's what you're trying to do. Here's how we can help guide you on that path, right? Just going back to the traditional, just good old storytelling methodologies. Make sure that you're centering your customer, your consumer as the hero of your story and showing how you're going to help them. And yeah, you have these great features as well, but that's not really what it's about. It's how are you solving their problem? And make sure that that's a real cornerstone, because I know we say that time and time again, but so many people forget it. I was just at a pitch competition. None of the brands led with that. They all started with, here we are, and here are all the things that we do, and here's more money, and here's why. They had the market research was buried maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 slides in. You don't have a lot of time, right? Go back to that 6 to 8 second or 6 to 12 second time frame for Gen Z. Nobody wants to sit through a long presentation, look at a website, not be able to find the information they need, look at your social posts. They want to know quickly that you are there for them And then they'll do a deeper dive if they agree.
Well, you have been the hero of this podcast. I've been speaking with Anika Jackson, Executive Director of the ICL Foundation, and my colleague at University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. We should do this again. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's my take. What resonates most for me from my conversation with Anika is effective brand building isn't just about budget size or technological sophistication. In fact, it might be the opposite. It's about authentic connection and understanding your audience's evolving needs and making them the hero of their own story. As higher ed institutions face unprecedented challenges to differentiate themselves, these principles of brand authenticity and strategic storytelling become even more critical. The most successful organizations will be those that can clearly articulate their unique value while adapting to shifting communication landscapes and remembering that their customers, their users, their audience members are at the center of everything. The democratization of digital tools may have leveled the playing field, but it's still human insight and genuine engagement that ultimately amplify a brand's impact.